5:30 Pacific Standard Time, and it is 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. This is a live stream with the possibility to chat about Bernando's daily menu and regime. And it is already Thursday, July 7th. It's 2021, and 2021 is about half over. So, I want to give you a few minutes to arrive. In particular, I was inspired to do this talk today because of the questions posted by subscriber Aaron Esteban. So Aaron had a lot of really good questions that were right on point, and I thought, I haven't actually done this in a long time. So who am I? I am Erica, and I am Bernando's oldest grandchild. And I am the manager of the legacy and just try and maintain, the life into his lifestyle and what he modeled, and keeping that torch alive for everyone. So if you are here, please make a comment and let me know you're here, because I can't know you're here unless you make a comment. Sometimes a little eyeball thing works on here and sometimes it doesn't. Also, I'm going to be sharing with you a new discount code, which is available as of today, July 7th, for all online purchases of Dr. Richard Schultz's herbal products. So I will do that. Okay, well, I don't see anybody here, so you know what? I'm just going to get started in case people are watching this later. All right. So I am going to start off, really with a disclaimer to say that, anything that you have questions about, if you are under a doctor's care, you should definitely check with your doctor, okay? Everyone is different. Everyone's body is different. That's what my grandfather used to say all the time. He used to say the chemicals, what he meant by that is a physiological makeup, and everyone's body is different, and he would always say, this is what works for me, and it's worked for me for over 100 years, and I see no point in changing it. And if people would come to him with, maybe an ache or a pain or a complaint about something, he would make a suggestion. And he said, well, why don't you try it? Try it. It might work. Try it. So let me turn on this light over here because it seems to me that I'm a bit in the dark. Hang on. That's a little bit better. Okay. Okay. So that is, everything should be taken in a level-headed manner. I also want to say that my grandfather, well, when he was growing up, there was no such thing as inorganic and organic food, right? So, but he used to tell people, eat organic whenever possible. And so that is really what he's talking about, and eating plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. There are two books that he left behind: Age Less, Live More, Achieving Health and Vitality at 107 Years and Beyond. And this book is really divided up into 4 chapters, which are as follows. Of course, it's dedicated to his father. The first chapter is The Philosophy of Faith. The second chapter is called An Object in Motion. The third chapter is called Offerings for the Temple, where he talks about his top 10 foods. And chapter 4 is called A Day in the Life, where he just really kind of casually breaks down, what he does in a day. Now, a lot of people have asked for, quote, recipes. My grandfather was trained as a French chef. He went to the Sorbonne in the 1920s, and he was trained in the French culinary arts. However, that is not what he ate himself at home. So you're not going to find really any French recipes on this channel. And a lot of the things that he ate on a daily basis, I think pretty much everyone eats more or less the same things, right? You know, every day or every week, everyone's got their routine, are going to be outlined in this live chat. But when I was assisting him putting his second book together, Beyond 100, How to Live Well into Your Second Century, there were a lot of people that wanted to have the quote recipes of some key things that he mentioned, which are his health salad, his cinnamon tea, his garlic paste. Let me see. What am I skipping here? Oh, of course, the superfood smoothie. How could I forget that? And there's probably one other thing that will come to me. So I went ahead and put that in this book, you know, just to help people out, because these things that he did on a regular basis. So let me get into it. Okay. My grandfather's lifestyle was built upon the foundation of moderation and obedience, based on the instructions of his father, who was a medical doctor and a root doctor. Today, people would call a root doctor an herbalist. My grandfather was born in Victoria, Brazil, in Espírito Santo on August 17th, 1901. And my great-grandfather, who was a medical doctor, that's also where he was born. Okay, so my great-grandfather was trained kind of in the herbology of the region. And I'm going to take an educated guess. Well, people knew about things like that in those days, right? And I'm going to just take an educated guess that it was probably his mother that instructed him in that way. Okay, so moving on. It comprised of daily exercise, adequate sleep, positive mindset, faith, eating nutritionally dense foods and fruits and vegetables, and a diet that was free of red meat, pork, chicken, eggs, not overeating, and pursuing various courses of study. He loved to read. He had a great library. His diet was rich in fruits and vegetables, fish, particularly fatty fish, clean water, herbs, and nuts. This is what worked for him, but he never tried to force anyone to conform. But if you sought his counsel, he would give it. Bernando Apollo was, during the course of his lifetime, a qualified chef, seaman, doctor of podiatry, reflexologist, massage therapist, and natural health consultant, author, lecturer, and inspiration. He was also a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, and as I have just found out recently, a great-great-grandfather. Okay, let me see. He even had a certification to do in hair and makeup that he received at the age of 82 for the Robert Fiant School of Hair and Makeup that had a branch in New York City. This was many years ago in 1983. And I guess if you could sum him up, you could say, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. All right, so let's start with his early to bed, early to rise routine. My grandfather was a working man, and he worked in the culinary arts. He worked as a chef for, I mean, decades and decades and decades. He started in his 20s, and he did his last stint as a professional chef in his 90s, in his late 90s. And so, being a working man and being a father and being involved in that kind of line of work, he rose early. It was his habit to rise between 4 and 5 a.m. In the morning, every morning. It didn't matter if it was Sunday or Saturday or Monday or Tuesday. He always woke up at the same time because he had his routine. So he would take a hot shower, and he would anoint his body with extra virgin olive oil and allow that to sink into the pores. If you open up your pores with a warm shower or a hot shower, or if any of you steam, go to a sauna, that opens up the pores. And if you put on extra virgin olive oil, it will soak into the pores. You rub it in well, and it won't leave you greasy. Instead of using hair gels that dry the hair, Bernando used extra virgin olive oil instead. Not a ridiculous amount of it, but people back in the day, would use these pomades and these different things to put in their hair. Today, people are using all kinds of hair gels that are alcohol based. And over time, it does damage your hair to do those things. So people would always remark about my grandfather about how he still had his hair. I mean, in fact, when he passed away at 114, he still had 2/3 of his hair. He didn't have a full head, but he still had a bunch of hair, around here. Food for thought. So after rising between 4 and 5 a.m., taking his shower, anointing his body with olive oil, it was time for his daily exercise routine. So he would do his exercise routine every day, rain or shine. So if the weather was inclement, he had exercise machines in his home. So he would have like a stationary bicycle, for example. Later, when he moved to Arizona, he sort of downsized. He still had a kind of a stationary bicycle. It just didn't have the contraption that you hold onto. You would actually sit down on a low seat, and then you would, pump your legs like that. He also had a little trampoline. He also had weights. He would lift weights to keep his arms strong. And he also had some of those elastic bands, those tension things. So he was always concerned about keeping his upper body strength together. And so he also had a walker. He had an indoor walker. So he would walk, whether he was indoors or outdoors, 1.5 to 2 miles every single day. And in all reality, I would say that he was able to keep up that 2 mile a day routine up until he was about 112. When he was 112, he slowed down a little bit and he did more like a mile and a half. We should all be like that, right? It's pretty amazing. Thank you so much for asking me to do this, or inspiring me to do this. So that was something that he would do, let's say, when he was living in New York City. He would actually get up, get in his car, he would drive to the Rockaways. In other words, he would drive to the beach, he would take off his shoes and his socks, and he would walk in the water, because the water, the salt water, not only is a great natural exfoliator in keeping your skin, supple, right? It also is great for your circulation. So that's one thing you can do. If you happen to be lucky enough to live by a beach, you can go to the beach and you can walk up and down in the water for 1 mile, 1.5 miles, 2 miles, as much as you can do comfortably. And that's one thing that he would do if the weather was good. Obviously, he wasn't going to go there in the winter. However, when he moved to Arizona, there was no beach to go to. So he would use an old technique that his father taught him, walking in the grass barefoot. So he would go to a nearby park, he would do his walk, he would do his walk for 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and then at the end of it, he would take off his socks and shoes, and he would just put his feet on the earth and absorb all that good energy coming up from the earth. This is something that's been, scientifically proven now. People also call it earthing, but there are very positive electromagnetic, how shall I say, vibrations or energy that actually is emitted from the Earth's surface that is beneficial for us. So that was another thing that he would do. I would like to point out that as he got older, He would also take a cane with him. He used to call it his third leg, because he said, you know, if I lose my balance and I fall down and I break a bone, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to heal. So he would take a cane with him. So my grandfather, Bernando, he did what he wanted and he was proactive, but he was always cautious and always taking precautions to make sure that he was not putting his body at risk in any way out of some foolishness. You know, sometimes you see older people trying to do some crazy stunts because they want to believe that they're still 25 or 35 and getting in trouble. He was not like that. He did what he wanted to do, but he would think about it. Okay, so I think you get that message. So, inclement weather, rain or shine, he had a provision for getting his daily exercise, whether he was indoors or whether the weather was good enough and he was able to go outdoors. The other thing he used to do too, actually upon waking, is that when he was in bed still, he told me that he would move his limbs. He would move his arms and his legs and his limbs and just kind of wake his body up, right? And just loosen up, and any stiffness or anything like that that he may have gotten during the course of the night, he would just shake it out. So that was another thing that he would do. Breakfast time. Generally, he would break his fast at about 8 a.m. At least when he was older, he would be doing that at 8 a.m. If he had to leave and go to work and be at work at a certain hour, then he would do that a little bit earlier. And how did he break his fast at first? You guessed it. Dr. Schultz's 100% organic, 100% wild-crafted superfood plus. So he would make a smoothie out of this. That's the other recipe that's in the book. He would make a smoothie out of this using fresh squeezed orange juice. I know some people that prefer apple juice. That's fine. You can use apple juice. You can actually use whatever you want. But what he did was that he would use fresh squeezed orange juice. He would use a very generous amount of blueberries. He loved blueberries. He would use kind of a generous teaspoon of his garlic paste, and then he would put a generous tablespoon of his Superfood Plus, mix that in the blender, and then drink that. Oh, a banana, and he would also put a banana in it because the banana will give a sweetness to it and make it more palatable. So again, this is something that you should check the ingredients. There is acerola cherry in this, so if someone is on blood thinners, then they need to be careful, right? Because acerola cherry, you know, it actually helps the circulation of the blood. But if you're on blood thinners, you don't want to take acerola cherry, okay? So again, everything you should always check with your health practitioner in case there's something you need to be mindful of for you. So that was how he'd break his fast, and he used to say it provides everything the body needs. So I'm not going to go, you know, read all the ingredients and the percentages here, but there's a lot in here. Vitamin A, C, E, and this is vegan, and it's soy-free, and it's 100% plant-based. Now, someone just asked a question here. Let me see if I can see what the question... Okay, I'm not seeing, but greetings to you. Thank you. Then, for breakfast, he would have organic oatmeal with bananas, blueberries, cinnamon, of course, in it, and, shocker, he'd put a little cream in it, okay? A lot of people are surprised by that, but if he had it, he'd put a little cream on top of that. He preferred steel-cut oats. He thought that was the best. If you're going to use steel-cut oats, you need to soak them the night before because they are extremely dense, okay? and that way they will expand and it will be much faster to cook and of course easier to digest the next day. But that was his routine, and then he would sweeten with honey. He would only use honey. My grandfather didn't use sugar for anything. He did not consume sugar. He only used honey, raw organic honey. So that's what he had every day. People were like, well, did he eat something else? Did he eat eggs? Did he eat bacon? Did he eat this, that? Nope. No, 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 no. He had his oatmeal every single morning with his blueberries, his fresh blueberries, slice of banana, his cinnamon in that, and a little cream. That was it. And to drink, he would have his green tea, also sweetened with honey. The other thing that he would have on hand, if he wanted to drink that, is that he would have a cup of cinnamon tea made from true cinnamon. So true cinnamon, it curls around itself. I have an earlier video here, I think I posted it 2 videos ago, about the difference between acacia or Chinese cinnamon and true cinnamon. True cinnamon is from Ceylon or Sri Lanka. So that's the kind that you want. So he would, well, let me say this. You can take a stick of cinnamon, you can put it in a cup, and then just pour some boiling water on that and let it steep for 10 minutes, and you can drink that. The other thing that he would do was that he would make a big pot of cinnamon tea. So you take like a bundle, you take like a fistful of true cinnamon sticks, put them in a casserole, cover them with water. You probably kind of want a big one, right? 5 liters. Cover it partially, bring it to a boil, bring it to a simmer. You don't need to really simmer it more than, I'd say, 15 or 20 minutes. Keep an eye on it because it does evaporate quickly. Let it cool, and then once it cooled to room temperature, he would transfer that into glass bottles or a glass container or a glass pitcher, and he felt, as instructed by his father, that that was very helpful in controlling blood sugar. You can also try substituting cinnamon tea for coffee, for example. The other thing that my grandfather did was he drank a lot of water, but he always boiled his water before drinking it. He would boil the water, let it cool, and then drink the water. It didn't matter if he bought water from the store, he'd still empty it out of the bottles and he would bring it to a boil. He used to drive his wife crazy. Why are you doing that? And he'd say, because my father told me to. Even when he was using a Kangen water purifier, because the water in Arizona is very poor quality for drinking, he would still boil his water. So by boiling your water, it actually kills any pathogens that are in the water. So this was just something that he was instructed, and it's something that he did until the end. Of course, when my grandfather was a small boy, what to speak of when my great-grandfather was a small boy, people didn't have, how shall I say, people didn't necessarily have a way to be absolutely sure that the water that they were drinking, was completely safe. Remember, in Europe, a lot of people died of cholera because the water was unclean. So this was a way to ensure that the water that you were drinking would be not harmful to you, is by boiling water. So there you go, one of my grandfather's habits. Okay, so after we've kind of covered breakfast and all the possibilities. How you're drinking cold boiled water right now? All right, Ashen One. All right now. So then after that, this is also about Bernando's positive outlook and mentality. He would do a morning feeding or nourishment of his mind and his spirit. I think I've already mentioned that he was a very, very avid reader, and he felt that it was his duty to constantly learn. So he was always reading, books on health. He enjoyed that very, very much, just to stay sharp. He also did crossword puzzles. And because he was raised as a Catholic, he read the Bible because his father instructed him to read the Bible. So he said, I want you to read the Bible until the pages are thin, until they crumble out of your hands. So sure enough, that's what my grandfather did. He had some very interesting and scholarly books on biblical study as well. But he read all kinds of books. He read books on Black history, health, and again, the Bible. And this is how, I think he kept his spirit fresh. On that note, I'm also remembering that his father told him that when he was at sea, because my grandfather worked as a merchant marine and seaman for many years and during the war, and he also worked on cruise ships and did all those kinds of things back in the day, when that was more of a common lifestyle thing. And what was I trying to say there? My goodness, I lost my train of thought. Okay, well, I'll get back to it. So let's get to lunch. Let's get to lunchtime, and then the other thing will come back to me. Oh yes, now I remember. So his father told him, when he was at seaman and stopping off at different ports, he said, when you go to a different port, don't go to the bar like the other sailors. Go to the church. I don't care what kind of church you go into, right? The Lord's present everywhere. But instead of getting sick and drinking whiskey and throwing up and all of that, you need to preserve your health. Go to a church instead of going to a bar. So my grandfather often remarked to me that he would actually walk on the bow of the ship to get his exercise, right? And then he would also walk back and forth, and he would also read the Bible up there, to the point where his co-workers used to call him Rev. And they also called him a sissy because he wouldn't drink whiskey and alcohol and go hang out at the bars with them, and he didn't care. He said, it doesn't look like you're having a good time to me, when he'd see them later, because of course they'd be throwing up and sick and all of that. So he was very fixed in his habits. You could say he was stubborn, and there was absolutely nothing that could throw him off that. Nothing. He was a very secure guy. He was very, very loved by his father, and he knew he was. And of course, I think my great-grandfather was also living this lifestyle. He wasn't just telling Bernando to do these things, he was also doing these things himself. So as far as lunchtime goes, that could vary a little bit. Again, he would always drink green tea sweetened with honey. He could have a salad, right? He often would have a soup. One of his favorites was barley soup. There's a recipe on this channel for his barley soup. You can watch Bernando preparing that himself. Or he might skip a solid lunch and he might drink a fresh vegetable juice that he would make, let's say, from green vegetables instead. Or perhaps he would have a fruit salad. But the thing about him is that he was always eat at regulated times. I remember one time we were, he was about to eat, and he asked me if I was going to eat lunch, and I said, oh, I'm not hungry, I don't feel like it. And he said, I always eat at my fixed time, whether I feel like it or not. And that really surprised me. For some reason, that surprised me, because he wasn't an overeater. He always ate in moderation. But eating at fixed times was definitely a big thing for him. Let me see. Now, if he happened to be dining out, let's say a friend invited him to go out for a luncheon, normally a lot of the things on the menu were not to his liking, were not to his regime, but he usually could find brown rice and grilled salmon and some green vegetables. Maybe that might be a salad or some asparagus or a side of broccoli. So he would have that for lunch, again, if he were out with a friend. But again, if he were at home, lunch could consist of a broccoli soup. It could consist of barley soup. It could be fresh tomato soup. It could be a vegetable soup. It might be black beans and rice. But he always, always, always had a green vegetable no matter what. Let me see. Hello, thanks for all you do. Your grandpa's really inspiration, LaDawn J. Whitfield. Oh, you're so welcome, LaDawn. I'm so glad you were able to join us over here. My pleasure and my honor. I know that I'm very fortunate to have had him for a grandfather. Very fortunate. Let me see. Sometimes he might even eat oatmeal at lunchtime, surprisingly. Now, a lot of people wanted to know if he snacked, right? Because Americans are definitely into snacking. Well, if he did have a snack, and if you came to his house, he would have nuts on the coffee table. You're welcome. He would have nuts on the coffee table. He would snack on Brazil nuts, cashews, peanuts, macadamia nuts, almonds. He loved almonds. That's what you would find. You wouldn't find dishes of candy on the table if you came over. And if you wanted to, if you were smart, you'd ask him if you could have a cup of his fresh fruit salad. He always had a container, or almost always had a container, of fresh fruit salad. He would make a big container of about a gallon and have that in there. There's also a demo on this channel of Bernando. Hello, Artizy. He would of Bernando making his fresh fruit salad and explaining to you all the ins and outs of that and how to get it juicy and all of that. So that's really what he snacked on. It would be fresh fruit, or it would be nuts and seeds. Also, sunflower seeds, things like that. There may be some nuts and seeds that agree with you, and there may be others that don't. But, they're very, very, very concentrated in proteins and trace minerals. So that was his rationale behind that. Also, as a snack, he might have a piece of whole wheat toast with some raw unprocessed peanut butter on it. Okay, well, I probably shouldn't name names, but none of the peanut butter that has sugar in it. No, he would have raw unprocessed peanut butter. You're welcome. So, these days, usually you can go to the grocery store and even, get some peanuts and, make fresh peanut butter on the spot. You can do that if you don't have something at home. It is possible to buy unprocessed peanut butter as well. So there you go. He actually met George Washington Carver, and that's talked about in this book a little bit. George Washington Carver is the Peanut Man. If you don't know about George Washington Carver, look him up. He was a genius. Let me see. Now, I guess before I get into, let me get into dinner, okay? So his dinner time could be any time between, let's say, 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. He did not like eating late because he said, someone asked what time Bernando went to bed. He went to bed at 9 p.m. Between 9 and 9:30, he was in bed. So unless he was out doing a lecture, he was in bed, Okay, when you're out doing lectures, sometimes things can run over. But other than that, he was definitely an early to bed, early to rise kind of a guy. So this gets back to the dinner time, eating between 4:30 and 6:30, because he said, I want to be able to digest my food. I don't want to lay down at night and have all that food sitting on my stomach, because when you are sleeping at night, you should be healing, you should be resting. Your body shouldn't be going through this process of trying to digest food at night. A lot of people have a hard time sleeping at night. I wonder how many people who have a hard time sleeping at night are eating too late. So he wanted to have at least a couple of hours there before he went to tuck in at night to have that time to digest his food. Very, very important. If you're not doing that, try it. So what would he have for dinner? Okay. So for dinner, again, he was very, very fond of fish, my grandfather. He was very fond of that. So salmon was a big one for him. Or if he didn't have that, he would have sardines. He would have this kind of fatty fish, really almost any kind of fish. It could be fillet of sole. It could be, I think maybe even trout, but salmon was definitely his favorite kind of fish. And he would have that a few times a week. As a matter of fact, he could even have that every night. He was fine with that. Every now and then, about once a year, he would have lobster, which I never cared for, but there you go. I'm just telling you the truth. Let me see. And of course, he would always have a green vegetable with that sauteed in onions. So whether he was having asparagus, or whether he was having broccoli, or collard greens, or kale, or whatever kind of green vegetable it would always be very, very lightly sauteed in olive oil with onions and garlic. He was a big fan of onions and garlic. And of course, if you read his book, you will understand why. Onions are beneficial for the blood pressure, for so many things. They're also, I believe, a natural chelator. They're a natural blood purifier. And the garlic is very high in vitamin C. It is antiviral, it is antifungal, and so on and so forth. And of course, these things add a nice flavor to your vegetables, right? So he would always, always, always do that. And he would have perhaps brown rice. He did not eat white rice. Or he would have quinoa. He was also very fond of quinoa. I never saw my grandfather eating pasta. I never saw him eating spaghettis. He never ate anything that he thought was going to gum up his large intestine and his small intestine. He never ate anything that he thought was going to gum up his colon. He was absolutely on point about keeping his colon clean. He said if you're eating 3 times a day, you should be passing stool 3 times a day, at least. He didn't have any problems going to the bathroom. He wasn't sitting there on the toilet for half an hour or 45 minutes or even an hour, the way so many people are today. And we wonder why there's a crazy amount of colon cancer. And of course, he also drank plenty of water. So he was very well lubricated in there. And of course, all the fiber that he was eating. Oh, you do? Okay. Cool. So, let me see. What else can I say about this? He also would leave a third of his stomach empty because he followed actually that principle of Ayurveda. If you know Ayurveda, my grandfather was very learned in all these different things, but he was practical, about implementing them in his life. So he would have his meal, he would drink after the meal, but he would also leave a third of the stomach full of air, as you say. He wouldn't stuff himself so he was hardly able to rise from the table. He never did that. He always left enough room so he was able to digest his food. People would notice that they'd say he kind of ate like a bird. So yes, he did talk about the benefits of sunshine. He would walk outdoors in the sun, having his arms exposed and his face exposed for at least a half an hour. Yeah, he was big into sunshine and vitamin D. I mean, anything that was good, my grandfather was into it, but zero fads. No fads at all. He was not into fads. So yeah, sunshine is important. Of course, it's good for your mood as well. He would actually advise people to put extra virgin olive oil on if they were going out in the sunshine, just to try it to help to prevent from burning. And of course, his skin was always smooth and supple. He didn't have any wrinkles because that's what he used. Now, let me see. Okay, so now I'm going to get into 3 more things and kind of wrap this up before I get into the nighttime bedtime routine. Desserts. He would always say, obedience in moderation, but even be moderate about your moderation. So my grandfather was, he wasn't like a fanatic. Sometimes he would have key lime pie. He was fond of key lime pie. So again, if he were invited out to a meal, and it was on the menu, he would have key lime pie, a small slice of that. Around the holidays, he was very, very fond of pecan pie. So, but made with honey. It had to be made with honey, otherwise he didn't want the pecan pie. Okay, so he was fond of that. He loved pecans, or pecans, as he used to say. And he would have an occasional scoop of ice cream. And of course, his favorite ice cream was green tea ice cream. Green tea ice cream. He would either have a little scoop of green tea ice cream or vanilla ice cream. So that was really it for him. I never saw him go crazy with the desserts either. I mean, on his birthday, and his birthday was always like a big grand affair, Yvette or whoever would come in with these like enormous cakes and everything, and he would get up and he would cut the cake, and then he would have no cake. Everyone else would be eating the cake, but he wouldn't eat the cake. He was very, very fixed about his habits. If he was going to go somewhere and he thought he was going to miss his dinner, you know what he would do? He would eat his dinner before he left. And if he was at someone's home and they offered him something to eat, he'd say, no, thank you, I've already eaten, So that was Grandpa and desserts. Now, alcohol. Bernando did not drink alcohol, with the exception of a sip of wine if a host wanted to offer him a glass. So I actually have a photo of Bernando with a glass of wine, actually kind of glaring at the camera a little bit like, what are you trying to prove? But he was in Florida to actually celebrate the birth of his first great-grandson. So the family went out, to a nice place to have a big meal, and I guess everyone had a little wine, and so, he had a little bit. But if you were going to serve Bernando wine, it had to be red wine, and, maybe just an inch, and just to be gracious, he would have a little bit of that, but not polishing off glasses and glasses like you see people do. He was moderate about that. He did not drink coffee. He found it unpleasant. Also, he was always already so full of energy in life. I don't think he felt the need to have coffee. He certainly wasn't sleep deprived. When he went to bed at night, when he hit the sack, he was out cold. In fact, he wouldn't even move. Sometimes his wife would be worried if he was dead because he didn't have, because he didn't move when he was sleeping. Of course, if he was snoring, then you knew he was definitely alive, but he was a very, very sound sleeper. Let me see. That being said, my grandfather was a gracious host. Again, remember, he did work in hospitality and in the culinary arts for decades and decades. So, he did have a little liquor cabinet in their home. So if someone came over and they wanted a drink, he was able to offer that to them. But he himself was not interested in doing that. Let me see. One thing my grandfather did do, though, was that he enjoyed a good cigar. My grandfather would smoke very high quality cigars from Cuba. And he would have that, every now and then, actually. And he was fine with that. Isn't that funny? It was, I guess, kind of I don't know, he just enjoyed a good cigar. Someone pointed out that my grandfather's nickname was Cuba, and his nickname was Cuba because when he was a little boy, he spent the first winter in this hemisphere in Cuba because it was so cold for him. His uncle, said to his father, why don't you take the boy and to Cuba and let him stay there for the winter till he gets used to it, and then bring him back in the in the summertime because this weather is too much for him. So when he arrived in the fall for the school and the kids wanted to know his name and he said his name was Bernando, they said, "Oh, that's too much name. Don't you have a nickname?" Or they asked him where he's from, and he said he was just a little boy, so where he'd come from. So he said Cuba. It was like about 6 years old. So they said, "Okay, well, we're just going to call you Cuba." Yeah. Okay. So moderation is the key, but not smoking cigarettes and all those kinds of things that you're putting into your lungs. So I guess someone should do research on smoking cigars and what that's like. But I remember as a child, back in the day, that a lot of the older gentlemen, of course they seemed ancient to me at the time, gentlemen would smoke cigars. They didn't really smoke cigarettes. They would have a little cigar. They'd have their dinner, and while they were having a discussion and relaxing and kind of hanging out amongst themselves, they would smoke a cigar. Okay, now let me see. Let's get into his nighttime routine. Oh, I didn't mention what else. I think I did mention he would also eat black beans for dinner, okay? Or it could be a soup. So these things are interchangeable. You'll see that, I just want to mention this, you'll see that the staples in his diet weren't like all over the map and like that. It was basically, fish and vegetable soups and, black beans, brown rice, quinoa, always green vegetables, green beans, broccoli, spinach, asparagus, kale, etc. Definitely onions and garlic were a staple in the kitchen. Extra virgin olive oil, of course. Fish with a preference for fatty fish. About once or twice a year, he would have lobster. And, oatmeal for breakfast. Lots of fresh fruit, lots of blueberries. He ate a lot of bananas. That seemed to agree with him. And the only meat that he would eat, and that would be once a year, would be lamb on Easter. Now, I made a video on this channel about why he ate lamb, and I want to say there was no health benefits for the reason why he ate lamb. It was really more of a custom. It was more of a cultural thing, because remember, my father was raised as a Catholic, and you'll find in the Judeo-Christian tradition around Easter, people will have lamb. And I did my research on it, and that is because in that part of the world, when people were coming out of winter time, there wasn't a lot to eat, there wasn't a lot to choose from, but there was livestock, right? There was lamb, so people would have lamb around that time of year. So I just wanted to clear that up in case anyone thought there was some inherent health benefit to eating lamb. Of course, I suppose that if you were going to choose between beef and lamb, lamb would be the better choice. But he says in his book, in this book, aside from the fact that eating red meat clogs up your colon, right, and pork and all those things, he also refrained from eating it because he said, well, if you've ever been to a slaughterhouse and see how the animals are treated there, I think that if you have a heart, you won't eat red meat either. So there was some compassion there, and I would say, yeah, there was some compassion there for sure. Not good for the colon, right? And he found it to be cruel. Okay, so now let's get into the nighttime routine. Okay, so we've already said that he was an early to bed person, 9 p.m. as a general rule. He was in bed and out like a light. He'd have maybe a banana about 20 minutes before he went to sleep. And for him, he found that to be almost like a natural sleeping pill. He'd be out cold. But he was very, very fastidious and conscientious about taking care of his feet. So he would do a nightly foot spa. He would soak his feet every night using Castile soap. He would say if you didn't have Castile soap, to use Ivory soap. He would put extra virgin olive oil in the water as hot as you can stand it, and he would put you can even put Epsom salts in there, you know. And it sounds strange to put extra virgin olive oil in your foot bath, but guess what? It removes all the dirt and grime on your feet, you know. It's amazing. So you'll see that when you do that. And then he would have a little pumice stone, right? And he would very gently use a pumice stone to clean his heels, right? And any, you know, buildup. Actually, he didn't have any buildup on his feet because he was so disciplined and religious about it. I mean, his feet were as soft as a baby's. Most people have, you know, bunions and corns and calluses and thick skin and cracked heels and all of that. My grandfather didn't have any of that. Washing your feet before bed improves sleep quality. Thank you, Ash and Z. Good to know. Yes, and for the other person who asked, yes, he would just use cream, just cow's milk on his oatmeal. But you could use goat's milk. You know, that's fine. Remember, these are guidelines. Remember, these are things that work for him. You know, you may need to adjust things, or there's things you may not want to do. For example, I don't eat any fish at all. I'm a total vegetarian. I don't eat any fish. I don't eat any eggs. I don't eat chicken. I don't eat pork. I don't eat beef. None of that, right? So because that's what works for me. Okay. So you have to think, you know, about yourself. You have to know thyself. You're so welcome, Ashen. So he would do his nightly foot spa every night, and you know, just use a pumice stone, get all those rough patches, do it little by little. He was also a podiatrist, so he understood the importance of the feet. Also, his father said, you know, your feet are very important. They're carrying you around everywhere you go. If you're working, you're standing on them all day. They are wrapped in you know, socks and shoes. They don't see the light of day, right? Maybe you're sweating. Maybe your shoes are too small. You'll notice in the city, when I lived in New York City, I would see people, you know, trying to climb up the stairs, and I could see that their feet were killing them. They could barely make it up the stairs, right? What a benefit it would be that when you get home at night to make yourself a little foot bath, and even if you're watching television, soak your feet in the foot bath, relax, watch the TV, you know, and then gently take the dead skin off. Dry your feet very nicely, and then anoint your feet in olive oil. If you're worried about it leaving a stain on your sheets, then put on cotton socks. And if you do that regularly over time, you will see that your feet become soft and the circulation becomes better. And it's just a wonderful self-care thing to do. And then he would go to sleep, and that would be it. That was his routine. I also wanted to mention that he was probably, quote, the original metrosexual, and that he would also get manicures. I went with him one time when the last month and a half of his life, when I was staying with him in Arizona, and I regret that I didn't take the photo, right? Because I don't know, I thought we were going to get to go back again, right? But you know, he would go and he would have a manicure done and have his nails done and his nails filed and his hands massaged. You know, of course, he was of that era of man that they were very, you know, fastidious and meticulous about their appearance, right? They wore suits, their hair was together, everything was clean, you know, their nails, they had their cologne on, you know, they were pulled together as individuals. So I hope that this answered your question. I've gone on a little bit longer than I had originally intended to go. But I do appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. If I didn't get a chance to answer your question, please leave a comment in the comment section and I will get to that. And now the code. So there is a new code for HerbDoc, herbdoc.com. That's Dr. Richard Schultz. It's AFLNEW, AFLNEW. That's what you need to get a 10% discount on first-time orders. It doesn't apply on sale items, of course, but for everyone who hasn't ordered, if you use AFLNEW, I will put the referral code, you know, in the description here. So there's often free shipping, which is great. So 10% off and free shipping if you're interested in picking up an item like the Superfood Plus, or maybe the little echinacea that Bernando used to use. What did Bernando brush his teeth with and used as a deodorant? Okay, I'll answer that question. You know, my grandfather just used Colgate. And like, I know that that's probably really shocking because, you know, today we know that they put fluoride and all that stuff in it. I don't know what the chemical makeup of Colgate and Crest toothpaste was in, you know, 1910 or 1920 or 1930 or 1940. If anyone wants to do the research on that and get back to me about it, I would love to know. But I don't know. I'm going to guess that maybe it didn't have all the junk that it has in it now. So he would use that. Okay. Of course, today there are non-fluoride toothpastes that are available. But, you know, I think that when you are... I think that when you're kind of set in your ways and something's worked for you, you just kind of tend to stick with it. There's just certain things, you know, that he didn't question. I mean, if I were to go in there and try and change his toothpaste on him, he'd say, what are you doing, you know, da-da-da. Deodorant? I think he just used a man's deodorant. I think he just used, like, Mitchum or something. I mean, it wasn't anything special. I mean... And I think there's really something to be said in a way for that, you know, is that his regular routine really kept him so on point and so in balance. And also he would do a liver detox about 3 or 4 times a year. He would do the liver detox. Dr. Richard Schultz has got that liver detox. He would do that on the regular. And, you know, I suppose anything that could have maybe slipped through the cracks or something and caused him a problem, at least as far as he was concerned, wasn't an issue for him. That being said, you know, we don't live in the same world. The world is not the same as it was last year or 5 years or 10 years or, you know, even 6, 7 years ago. So I'm just telling you, I'm just being honest with you and telling you, you know, what he did, okay? So, personally, what kind of deodorant do I use? I use deodorant that doesn't have any aluminum in it. You know, I kind of use a combination of like, what is it, like, you know, baking soda and all of that. That's what I do. I know some people use crystals. Some people don't use deodorant at all. Some people use salt. So, you know, I think as far as that is concerned, you have to figure that out for yourself, and to each his own. Okay, so I'm gonna go now because guess what? It's my dinner time. Thank you very much for joining me. AFL new is the new code. I will put the link uh, for you to get that 10% discount for a first time offer in here later. And I thank you very much for being here. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. You're welcome, Cheryl, Fahi. Okay, bye everyone. Okay, let me see if I can figure out. Yep, I'm gonna end. Okay, bye everyone.